Thank the gentleman from North Carolina. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've sat here and I've listened in the back. I've listened to both sides. The thing that just disturbs me more about this hearing, probably, Congressman King said it was one of the most interesting hearings that we've done and one of the relevant hearings. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I think for me it actually brings out one of the most disturbing hearings that we're having to have. And I think it's a progression issue here. And I'm not going to be Republican or Democrat. It's happened more in the last 15 to 20 years. I think this is a progression of executives that both Republican and Democrat have used, really in some ways push that boundary, stretch that boundary, and I think in the case of of the president now has outright stepped over those boundaries. And we can have legal discussions up here all the time. The problem is from where I come from up in Northeast Georgia is people they don't get it. They look at a government, they look at an executive, they look at what's going on right now, and they just basically say, this is not the way it's supposed to work. This is not what you can go back to Schoolhouse Rock, you can go to a civics class, you can do whatever, and you can be graduated law professors, but at the same point, if you can't communicate it to the people who have to live under the situation, then there's mass problems, and I believe there's a right to have a mass problem right now. We've talked about the power of the purse. I've talked all session and ever since I got up here about I believe truly that this institution has got to matter again. It's Article 1. We've talked about Article 3 a lot. We've talked about Article 2 a lot, but it's Article 1. Congress has to matter again, and that means that we have to take seriously our role of budgeting. We have to take seriously our role of legislating, but also holding accountable when we are being bypassed. And that's a concern. And we've talked about using the power of the purse. I think that's been an issue that's been well trodden today. We've talked about elections, and I think that's an issue that has been discussed. But the other issue for me that is bothersome, and you try to explain, is what can you do? I'm often asked this. You got to go up there and you just impeach him. Or you go up there and you just impeach the president. Or you go up there and you just cut funds off. You shut everything down. And it just becomes a blur. And now we have Ms. Lazarus, and I respect your right to a differing opinion than mine on most things here, to say that I believe he has stepped over and you believe he hasn't. That's where we differ. And Mr. Turley, we'll agree on some things and probably agree on others. But you made a statement that said, agree or not, it was not in the bounds of the Constitution. And I think that's interesting for us to talk about for just because it comes back to what do we do? Besides getting our, quote, act together, if you would, as Congress, what can we do? Because standing is an issue that we're having to. So I want to ask you just this question. Where do we go to begin that process of reclaiming our Article 1, our constitutional role, so that it is a three-legged stool and not right now a 1.5?
Well, it's an excellent question. And despite my deepest concerns, I remain optimistic. I'm a Cubs and Bears fan, so I've lived most of my life with unrequited desires. But it is as serious as you suggest, and there's a good reason why people can't understand what's going on, because we are acting outside the system. We've essentially taken the Madisonian system offline, and we are in this ad hoc, improvisational world of constitutional law that is very, very dangerous. Where I disagree with my friend, Mr. Rosenkranz, is I'm always leery about people who say the solution is elections. The framers didn't intend for elections to be the solutions to constitutional problems. They created a system of checks and balances to allow the system to correct itself, because there are plenty of abuses. You could have majoritarian terror that would be just promulgated and continued through elections. Also, impeachment is not a good device for regulation. It's a very difficult thing. I testified at the Clinton impeachment hearings. It's a very difficult standard, and it's certainly not there as a substitute. I think that the hearing that this body should seriously consider is to have a hearing on members standing. I've been writing about this for years. I've represented members. If we had members standing, if members could go to court and raise unconstitutional acts, much of these problems would go away because we would be guaranteed review. Much of what we've seen from the, in my view, is based on the assumption, not necessarily a bad one, that nobody will be able to call them to account.
I believe you're right in that, and I think that's what you said you were an optimist. I am too if you've watched some of our sports teams lately in Atlanta. But I'm an optimistic realist. And I don't get on the plane to come to Washington, D.C. I still look at this Capitol, and I still believe it matters. I still believe that we're a shining light for the world. But I'm going to spend all of my time as best I can to bring us back to a balanced, checks and balance system in which Congress, Article I authority, is respected and honored, and we also have the system that most people in this country grew up understanding. And I think that's what this hearing ultimately is about, is the respect of the people who sent us here. And we've got to continue that. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman.